Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Before starting, subscribe and like the videos, it really helps a lot. The content from this video are taken from the web novel and manga series of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation. Now please enjoy the video.
Volume 8 Chapter 5 The Genius Youth's Secret. First half Part 1 Cliff Grimoire. The grandchild of the Pope of the Millis faith. Young and excellent with magic, a genius youth. He was a bit quick to pick a fight, his self-respect was strong, and he had a habit of seeing himself as a big deal. As a result, he had no friends. He had talent, however, he didn't rely on this alone and was diligent in his training. Though his mouth was terrible, his actions weren't. Though they were few, there were those who thought well of him. Cliff was now 16. Though he had become an adult a year ago, there wasn't anyone to celebrate that. His reason for coming to the Magic University was simple. In a few words, it was due to a power struggle. A few years ago in Militian there was an attempt on a Miko's, Shrine Maiden's, life. Because this incident was the work of the Pope's faction, the internal struggles intensified. During the conflicts, naturally the Pope had his grandchild take refuge on the other side of the world, in the kingdom of Renoa. Cliff, you possess great ability, Cliff thought. After a long journey, he arrived in the kingdom of Renoa. A harsh land. The food didn't suit him, the climate was harsh, and there was a fuss because his way of thinking was drastically different to the locals, he thought. In his first year he received two major shocks. The first time was by a person named Zanoba Sharon. He was a Miko. He was a person who was loved by the gods since birth. Though he was a bit messed up, his power was the real thing. He'd been seen lifting someone thrice his weight up by the head, and then throwing them. Though he had such power, he was at the Magic University. He was learning magic, focused completely on earth magic. From Cliff's perspective, his growth was slow. However, to begin with, there shouldn't have been a need for a Miko to learn magic. One of the theories regarding magic stated that it was a means for the weak to imitate the acts of the gods in the ancient past. Miko were people who possessed the power of the gods. They didn't have a need to learn things like magic. Thinking that, Cliff went and asked him, "Why are you learning magic?" There's something that I want to do." Saying this, Zanoba brought over a box and produced from it a doll. He then began to talk for a long time about the doll. Cliff only understood half of what Zanoba said. However, he at least understood from Zanoba's talk that this doll was something wonderful. "I've become the disciple of this doll's creator, and I wish to spread dolls throughout the world with him. For this reason I must be able to create dolls. If I'm not capable of the fundamentals of doll creating by my next meeting with Shisho, I won't be able to face him. However, I do also want to be able to create dolls myself, you see. It was what people called a dream. That was something that Cliff didn't have. Nay, it was something Cliff had given up on. Even though a Miko would be burdened with the expectations of his homeland, even though upon his homecoming, he probably wouldn't have any freedom, this man hadn't given up on his hope, in the chance that one day he might suddenly gain his freedom. And he planned to do what he wanted to do the moment that day came. Incidentally, Cliff didn't know about the circumstances surrounding the Sharon Kingdom and Zanoba. The conclusions he came to were a result of his common sense. He misunderstood. However, it left Cliff with a deep impression. He thought Zanoba was quite the person. "What kind of person is this Shisho of yours?" "He's a person named Rudeus Greyrat." Hearing this, Cliff received an incredible surprise. Rudeus Greyrat. Since the day he was rejected by Eris, this name had remained in his heart. He hadn't thought that he'd hear it again here, and furthermore from the mouth of the person who had left such an impression on him. The shock was huge. The second time was because of a senpai. Though this was as to be expected, Cliff had been under the impression that he was the strongest in the school. If you included close combat, then he was absolutely no match for Eris. However, he believed that there wasn't anyone who could beat him as a magician. He was a genius after all, and the ones enrolled in the school were student level. Even among the teachers there were many who couldn't use more magic than he could. As a result, he concluded he was the strongest in the school. This was simply him being conceited and was something he would learn roughly 2 months into enrollment. It was when he lost to the two beast race girls who were also rumored to be top class amongst the school, Rinia and Persena. Just who was it that started the fight? Cliff had a bad mouth and everything that came out of it was intolerable. At the time, though Rinia and Persena had already relatively calmed down, as expected, an impudent first year would rub them the wrong way. Cliff couldn't remember just what he had said that had angered them. However, he remembered the battle that followed. When Cliff used advanced level magic, Persena used elementary level magic to deal with it and at the same time put a stop to Cliff's chanting and movements. He told himself. And then one day, a senpai named Fitts defeated the two of them by himself, and Cliff received his second major shock. There was always someone stronger. Since coming to this school, Cliff realized this obvious fact. And that just being able to use advanced level magic didn't make you strong was something that Cliff finally understood. Then 2 years after he first entered, he received 2 more shocks that were even greater. The first shock. Rudeus Greyrat entered the school. He had an expression that lacked confidence. He was wearing a shabby grey robe. On first meetings, he would ingratiate himself to others while debasing himself. He'd lower his back and took an attitude that could be called servile. When he saw women, his gaze would stick to them. He had no appeal as a man. He was too far from the person that Cliff had envisioned based on the things he had heard from Eris and Zanoba. A guy like this, he thought. It's probably just someone with the same name, he thought. However, Zanoba called him Shisho and he knew about Eris as well. In that case, he had lied to them, Cliff concluded. Piling up lies upon lies. He fooled Zanoba and Eris, he thought. As proof of that, even when Rinia and Persena provoked him, he simply smiled foolishly and lowered his head. If he were truly strong, he'd beat the two of them down. Or so Cliff had judged. However, his true character would immediately be revealed, he thought. Zanoba was the real deal as a Miko, and he was a hard worker as well. Rinia and Persena's ability was also assured. He wouldn't be able to get by with lies or deception. Though he had also heard the rumor that Fitts was defeated by Rudeus, there was surely some mistake or perhaps Rudeus had lied again, or he had used some sort of cowardly trick. That was what Cliff had thought. But Rudeus showed his true power. He was a user of chantless magic. To start with, Zanoba's adoration for him further increased. Rinia and Persena also withdrew. That Fitts had recognized him as well, and it was said that once every few days they would study together in the library. Though he had this much ability, he was seen going to classes too. They were classes in elementary level divine attack and barrier magic. Even though he'd have no use for them after all this time, he still greedily made to learn the things that he was lacking in. Rudeus Greyrat had more ability than him. He was more diligent than him. He produced different results from him. It was a reality that Cliff shouldn't have wanted to recognize. However, it was probably because he had met with Zanoba, and had been defeated by Rinia and Persena. Unexpectedly, he readily accepted it. That this youth was far, far ahead of him. Even so, it wasn't as though he had come to like him. Accepting this reality and coming to like Rudeus were completely different matters after all. Then the final shock. It was something that happened on a certain day. It was something that happened when it had turned into the evening. It was something that happened while he was walking down the road. It was something that happened when he had looked up by chance. There stood a goddess. She had magnificent golden hair. She was leaning against the window and with a languid expression she was looking outside. Her face, dyed in the red of the evening, was beautiful. Cliff's heart was pierced. His gaze was stolen at a glance. However, it was purely physical. During his childhood when he was yearning for the life of an adventurer, he had said something like, "It'd be nice if my bride were someone beautiful," or something like that. The reason was because the alumni of the orphanage that had become clerics were beautiful. At the time, the woman by the window noticed Cliff. She gently smiled and waved at him. That gesture, that smile, that situation. All of it hit Cliff head on. Cliff thought, I was born to meet this woman. She was born to meet me. In that instant, Eris changed from the target of his first love into someone he simply admired.
That's it guys, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you want more and don't forget to like the videos.